Hey, it's Adrian. Today I wanted to share my thoughts after using the Galaxy Z Fold 4 for about 5 months. Now, this is my first foldable phone. I've never used any of Samsung's previous foldable phones or foldable phones from any company in general. Now, if you're considering getting a foldable phone for your first phone, I'm hoping my thoughts are going to help you. And if you do already own this phone, let me know in the comments down below if you agree with what I'm saying or if you think I'm way off. All right, guys, so before I get into my first thought, I just wanted to say, this is a beautiful phone. It's really been excellent so far. The engineering that went into this, it's really top notch. It feels sturdy, feels premium, and it feels like it's ready for the mainstream. As someone who's used a foldable phone for the first time, it doesn't feel like a gimmick. However, there's still a couple of things that, give me pause if I was going to recommend this to most people. So before you hate on me, just hear what I have to say fully and then let me know in the comments down below if you agree or disagree. All right, the first thing I want to touch on is the foldable aspect of the phone, of course. So the ability to go from the cover screen here right into the inner display in a matter of a second is something that just can't be matched with any other type of phone. And you really have that portability to just have something really small in your pocket, and then you can just open it wide up. And this has come in really handy in a bunch of situations. For example, if I need to look at a tutorial, if I'm following along with something, if I need to split screen apps like to message someone, check directions, check a restaurant menu, this has come in really clutch. That said, I just haven't found myself needing to use that inner display as much as I thought I would. It is really beautiful when I'm watching, a YouTube video, something on Amazon Prime, Netflix, whatever. But most of the times I actually don't find myself opening the phone up because most of the tasks that I need to do day to day, I can accomplish on the cover screen actually. Now, before you say, well, why did you buy a foldable phone if you're not going to use the inner display, which is kind of the main selling point of the phone? Let me explain a little bit more. Like with most other phones, when I'm using the outside display or this cover screen, I can easily use it with just one hand. So with one hand, I have, pretty good reach across the screen. I can check my email, I can check text, the weather, I could even watch videos if I wanted to and, use the camera and all of that. If you just get a text on your phone and you just want to reply to that really quickly while you're in the grocery checkout line or waiting for the bus, you can easily do that on the cover screen. You may not want to open that inner screen to text. And speaking of opening that inner screen, texting is a bit of a challenge on this phone once you have the inner screen opened, because you're kind of having to use two hands to text. What I've done is I've just kind of shortened the keyboard or reduced the width of the keyboard so that I could kind of have it floating and then I could just text with one hand. However, when I want to use the inner display, I must use two hands to open it up. The hinge is pretty stiff, which is a good thing. So it does require you to use two hands to open it up. And just when I think to like my day-to-day activities, I'm not always in a position where I'm willing to use two hands or, I want to use two hands. A lot of the times I would prefer to just one-handed. So maybe for people with really big hands, you can kind of one-hand the inside screen, but you could see my thumb only reaches to a certain point. So if I open this up fully in certain apps, I may need to use my other hand to access the menu or to click on something, say on a website link. In the inner display, whereas on the cover screen, all of that is easily accessible to me. So for me, the inner display, while it is super handy, I kind of limit its use mostly to media, if I'm going to be watching something on YouTube or Netflix, Amazon, or if I'm going to use it for like a tutorial or to follow it along. And it has come in really handy when I'm using the camera app because it allows me to really frame nicely and check focus. But, those are a handful of times, and I find that maybe 90-95% of the time I'm actually using the cover screen alone and not the inner screen. And I realize that I may not be the power user that I think I am, and there's a lot of you guys out there who just open the inside screen and that's all you're using. So since I have been using that cover screen so much more than the inner screen, the cover screen is one area that I would really like to see improved on the Z Fold 5. I would really like this screen to be a little bit wider. Right now I feel it's too narrow, and I know I'm probably a bit spoiled because those of you who have the Z Fold 3, this is a very welcome change because on the Z Fold 4 it's a little bit wider. But after taking a look at the Xiaomi Mi Mix Fold and the Honor Magic, I haven't held them in hand, but just looking at what I've seen online, having that little bit of extra width would really make the front screen so much more enjoyable to use. And then when you finally open up, you do have two wider screens as well. Another thing to consider is that if you always put a case on your phone, once you add on that case, you're going to add a certain level of bezels on there, and it makes it, more challenging to get your finger all the way to the edges of the phone since that bezel is in place. So obviously having a little bit wider would help a little bit with that as well. The next thing I want to touch on is using the cameras on this phone. So obviously the ability to have, a wide open screen like that to check focus, to check framing is something I can't do on any other type of phone. As well with this phone, as you take photos, you can see kind of like a live preview pop up on the side so that you can see, hey, did I get that photo in focus? Is the shot looking good, or do I need to reshoot? And it's not something you can do with another phone. Usually you have to go into the camera roll or the album, check it, then right back out. With this, right away you have that live view feature on there. So it's excellent in that regard. However, there are some times where I've been taking photos and I wanted a little bit of extra reach that I can't get with the Z Fold 4. So on the S22 Ultra, you can go from ultra wide to 10x optical zoom, and I really do love that phone because it fits almost any type of shooting situation you'd find yourself in. With the Z Fold 4, you can go ultra wide, but you can only go up to 3x optical zoom. So if you're someone who likes to zoom in a lot, that is something you will find yourself lacking on this. And it's not something that I really noticed that I needed till I had this phone, and I found myself always wanting a bit more extra reach in certain situations. So for those of you who already own this phone, I mean, let me know what you think. Do you find yourself wanting that little bit of extra reach that you can't get optically? Or am I in the minority where, it's not really something that you encounter most of the time? One area that this phone is excelled in is battery life. So I did not expect the battery life to be so good on this because it's a 4400 milliamp hour battery compared to the 5000 milliamp hour battery on the S22 Ultra and most other flagship phones. However, I think in my case, the battery life has been so good because, like I said, I'm mostly using this cover screen. So majority of the times, this is all that's being powered. Now, if I was using the inner display and, you're powering a much wider screen or much bigger screen, and you have to output brightness to fill all of that, versus this really small cover screen, maybe my battery life is going to be a bit different. So I think battery life is really going to be dependent on how how each person uses it. If you already own this phone, let me know what your battery life has been like. For those of you who are using your inner display much more than me, let me know, is it lasting you the entire day easily? Mine easily lasts a day and a half because I'm using it mostly cover screen and with dark mode. Another thing that I didn't know I would miss until it was taken from me is the S Pen. So you can't have the S Pen housed in the body on the Z Fold 4 like on the S22 Ultra. And the official Samsung case, the way that they implemented how the S Pen is housed, I'm really not a big fan of it because, once you put the phone open flat to use the inner display, the phone just kind of rocks once you have that S Pen holder at the back. And I don't know, it just seems like a poorly thought out design and kind of like an afterthought. So I really do hope that they implement this on the Z Fold 5. So those are my thoughts on the Z Fold 4 after using it for about 5 months. And I know some of you are definitely angry with me because you're thinking, who would buy a foldable phone if they're not going to use the foldable aspect of it? It's a main selling point of the phone and the reason why you would buy a foldable phone. And that is a very fair point. However, I would like to say, this was my first foldable phone, and after I read the comments, there were actually some people who went from the S22 Ultra to the Z Fold 4 like me, but they ended up going back down to the S22 Ultra. I shouldn't say back down, they just went back to the S22 Ultra. And the reason is they found some of the same takeaways as me. They found themselves using the cover screen more than the inner display. And at that point, if you're using the cover screen more, why not just get a phone with a wider screen or a larger screen anyway? So even though I shared those thoughts, obviously the way I use the phone is going to be different than how someone else uses the phone. So I still would highly recommend the Z Fold 4. If you're someone who really values that inside screen, you watch a lot of media on your phone, this is just the best that you can get. And I still remember when I took the phone out of the box and I held it in my hands for the first time, a foldable phone, it felt so premium, so sturdy, so rigid. And this is not a gimmick of a phone. This form factor is here to stay. It's solid, it's reliable, and I haven't had any issues that I've seen plague, previous models. No issues with the screen, no cracking, nothing, with the crease, really no problems at all. It's been a solid, reliable, dependable phone the whole way around. And I think for people who don't really use a computer or a laptop, this is an excellent phone to have. I spend most of my time on a computer, And maybe that's why I don't use the inner display as much. But if I didn't have a computer and I only had my phone to deal with, I would be using that inner display way more than I do. I did see some rumors online that the Z Fold 5 may have a wider screen and probably house like a built-in S Pen, maybe a slim one. But I didn't see anything about adding, like a 10x optical zoom on the phone. And if the Z Fold 5 has those features, it would really make this phone hard to compete with, because really the only thing that the Ultra series would have on it is the optical zoom. But let me know what you guys would like to see in the Z Fold 5. I'm hoping for obviously wider screen. That's the most important to me. A built-in S Pen would be nice, and obviously a larger or longer focal length for the optical zoom. So I don't know about you guys, but I am eagerly anticipating the arrival of the S23 Ultra and to review that phone. I know there's not a lot of big design changes from the S22, but I like the look of the S22, so it's not a big deal for me. What I'm looking forward to is going back to a big screen, having a built-in S Pen, and having that 10x optical zoom. And again, I'm not trying to say anything bad about the Z Fold 4. This is just an excellent phone. It's awesome. There's some areas that any other phone can't touch, like the ability to just double your screen real estate in a second, follow along with a tutorial, watch a YouTube video, Netflix, Amazon, whatever. That just comes in really handy. Sure, you can split screen on other phones, but until you split screen on a foldable device, it's a completely different world in terms of, the usability, split screening apps. But that said, I really am anticipating the S23 Ultra. So for those of you who do have the Z Fold 4 and you're enjoying it, does the S23 Ultra have anything on it that would tempt you to switch, or are you Z Fold 4 all the way? Alright guys, so let me know what you think in the comments down below. Am I way off the mark, or do you share some of the feelings that I have after using the Z Fold 4 as well? And as always, please consider liking and subscribing. It really does help me out a ton, guys. And of course, stay subscribed for the S23 Ultra. I am going to be getting that and reviewing it against the S22 Ultra to see how it compares, if it's worth that upgrade, and then later against the Z Fold 4 as well. So I'll see you in the next one soon.